Mr. Watt, you knew the defendant when you were waiting with him outside of court, is that correct?
Sitting next to him in the courtroom.
Sitting next to him in the courtroom. You did not see him interacting with people out in the streets, is that correct?
No.
So you don't know what his interaction was on the street?
Only through reputation and talking with other guys.
Now, you testified that he's here because he did what he was trained to do?
Yes, sir.
Was he trained to shoot young men who were laying on the ground just twitching?
Objection.
Overall, it's cross-examination.
Was that his training, sir?
You're trained to shoot until the threat is over.
Are you trained to shoot until the life is over or until the threat is over?
Till the threat is over.
And when a man is laying on the ground with no ability to do anything but twitch, is he a threat? Is that the training?
I was not there. I could not answer that question, and I was not in Jason's shoes. I don't know whether he was threatened or not, sir.
So that would be up to the jury to decide. Is that your understanding?
That's why we're here.
That's a legal question. Move on, Mr. Cullen.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nothing.
Thank you very much.
Judge.
All right, call your next witness.
Dean Angelo.
Step remain standing, face the clerk.
Raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Step up, please. Thank you. Again, the seat's adjustable. The microphone's live, so if you pull your chair up to the mic, speak into the mic, everybody will be able to hear it. Proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Dean Angelo Sr.
Could you spell that, please?
DeanAngelo Sr. SR.
And what is your occupation?
Retired.
What is your former occupation?
I was a Chicago police officer for over 37 years. I was the president of the Fraternal Order of Police for 3 years. Detective with the police department. Worked in the gang crime unit in the police department, in the bomb and arson unit when I was a detective. I was a detective trainer. I had a pretty wide range in career.
You said you were FOP president for 3 years. What 3 years were those?
April of 14 to April of 2017.
So it was during that time that you met Jason Van Dyke, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you tell the court how you came to know him?
I first met Jason the day that he bonded out. Was the first time we became, we got face to face. We were told that he was taken into custody. We arrived for the hearing in the morning, and then we waited for his release that afternoon, and we waited to help him fight through more or less the media and exit the area.
So you were the president of the FOP when this October 20th, 2014 happened, right?
Yes.
How did you learn about this shooting?
As a president, I have a half dozen officers of the FOP working as field representatives. They're on a 24-hour clock. They rotate the responsibility. When a shooting incident occurs, our phone bank notifies them. They then go out to the scene depending on the circumstances, which is what was done on the night of the 20th. The next day is when that field rep arrived at the FOP office and asked if he could meet with me for a few minutes, and he informed me of the incident.
And what did he inform you happened the night before as far as the aftermath?
Well, it's pretty quick briefing. We just had our contract ratified just 4 days earlier. We were on our way to the city council, I believe.
No, sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you want me to continue?
I'm sorry, please continue.
Okay, so he came in and gave me a pretty quick debriefing, made sure none of our
I'm
guys.
sorry, listen, this is about what one of the field officers told the president of FOP. That has nothing to do with the relationship with Mr. Van Dyke. So get the things that are material and relevant.
Okay, so did you develop a friendship with Jason Van Dyke?
Eventually, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and how did that come to be?
Well, it came to be shortly after he was released. We were trying to secure some employment for him. He was out of a job. He was out of insurance for his family. We made several attempts to get him employed on some loading docks with some familiar places that we regularly try to assign officers that were not working to take advantage of employment. They turned us down because they were concerned about confrontations between
I miss what,
Jason.
let's get the things that are material. These are public, opinions of private companies that have nothing really to do at this time. Otherwise, their opinion is negative. I don't think you want to introduce that into your mitigation, do you?
How long did Jason work at FOP?
After we couldn't find him a job, we hired him at FOP. He sat in our office, mentioned that he would do anything for employment. We hired him. He lasted with us until the trial ended here.
What is your opinion as to Jason's character?
He's not the monster people have made him out to be in the media and in the political circles. He is a big, gentle kid. And everybody's a kid to me. I'm at this age. He's a hard worker. He's dedicated. He's a good dad. He's religious. He is quite loyal. Was told me that he was going to quit his job for fear that I was going to take a negative hit for hiring him when the FOP elections came up. He was willing to sacrifice that for me. I told him it wasn't going to happen. He is very dependable, hardworking, beat me in the office most of the time, and I started my days before 6 o'clock every day for 3 years. Somebody you can depend on, and again, I like to reiterate, he's not the person that people think he is because of this incident.
And you developed a friendship, your family's developed a friendship. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you became close with his whole family, his kids, his wife?
Yes, yes. My wife and Tiffany are quite close. The girls are over at the house, and we've become close as a result of our encounter.
With the friendship that you've developed with his family, have you learned of any type of, have you learned about their financial situation?
Yes.
And what do you know about that?
Well, I know that Tiffany's job at the time was being threatened and that she had to shut down her business. Her customers were threatened, their vehicles were threatened online, that if you participate with Tiffany Van Dyke's services, we're going to damage your car. We know where she works at. We know where she performs these functions at, and we're going to be there. And she closed up shop. We couldn't find him a job, so we knew that he was struggling. And those struggles continued because we couldn't match the salary of the Chicago Police Department with the FOP. But we were able to supply some insurance protection for the children.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about Jason before he's sentenced?
Well, he's raised two good kids. He's got a very supportive wife and father. I've learned about some of his extended family as well, who are extremely supportive. You know, it was a perfect storm that night. I don't believe that this was something I know this wasn't something he set out to do. This was a situation that arose for lack of any other description, but lack of compliance. If a knife is dropped, we're not here. If medicines are maintained that are prescribed and narcotics aren't ingested, maybe we're not here. If a taser is close and utilized and the person with the taser doesn't drive by and have to make a U-turn to get there, we're not here. This is a situation that occurred, again, because of a perfect storm. When friends of mine ask me about why I'm here every day in court or what I'm doing here today, I ask them, if this situation occurs with the same results and there's 2 shots fired and it ends, are we here? And they say no. So to me, that response generates then a reply, then you believe he was justified or had the ability to shoot at that time. It's the emotional component associated with those other shots. That's why we're here.
Thank you, Mr. Angelo. I don't have any more questions.
Ms. Gleason, cross-examiners.
Sir, you would agree with me when you knew that we're here because the defendant fired 16 shots into Laquan McDonald's body. Isn't that correct?
That's what I just said, yes.
No, you said, well, he only fired 2 shots, something of perfect storm, and some perfect storm has something to do with the fact that Jason Van Dyke is sitting in that seat. Isn't that correct?
That's part of the storm, yes.
Yes. And in your mind, the storm is the fact that Laquan didn't drop the knife, right?
It's over if he does.
And it's also in your mind that Laquan didn't stop when they told him to stop, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you have a different opinion than what the law allows. Am I correct?
I also have a different vantage point of what the video shows. He's the only one that knows what occurred before those shots came out of his weapon. The only one, him and Officer Walsh, are the only 2 people who have the true advantage to see what they saw, not us from the backside. And the video that you put up there over and over again demonstrates, when you slowed it up, his right foot coming to his left, Laquan McDonald's, his left shoulder dipping to their direction, and his right arm disappears. If his right arm disappears from the back, where is it? It's in front of his body like they said it was.
Okay, so you're taking their word. Let's say there wasn't a videotape. Does that mean the cop always wins? In your mind?
The police don't always win.
They don't?
The memorial wall in Washington will prove that out.
Okay, we're not talking about officers who are killed. We're talking about officers who are out there in situations. You say because the video didn't show it from Laquan's point of view, then obviously Van Dyke must be right, right?
No, I said it didn't show from Officer Van Dyke and Officer Walsh's point of view.
And your job as president of the FOP is to stand up for every single member of the Chicago Police Department who's a member of the union, correct?
No,
It's not?
it's not.
You don't have to pay for the defense of every Chicago police officer?
No.
Well, why'd you pay for his defense?
legal defense that dictates how the money is spent to support officers. The officers have to be doing something, whether it's on duty or off duty, and being considered in the performance of their duty. Stealing a car while you're in uniform on duty does not meet that measurement. So that officer who stole that vehicle while on duty would not get covered. An individual such as Officer Van Dyke, who was performing as a police officer, met that threshold.
Okay, how much money did you spend on that defense?
I would have no idea.
You have no idea?
No, I'm not the president any longer, and I'm sure bills are still coming in.
Okay, from 14 to 17, you were the president, were you?
Correct.
Did you have to know about those things, like how much money was going out for the defense?
You would have to ask my treasurer for that number.
Okay, but you don't know that number, but you know that the Van Dykes were in a bad financial situation?
Right.
Okay. And you couldn't find him a job anywhere else, so you guys gave him a job, right?
Right.
Did you make up a job just so he could get paid?
No, we had an opening to work inside the building, and we filled that opening at that time. I couldn't get him on a beer truck because guys were afraid the beer they dropped at the grocery store would be canceled, those deliveries, for fear that someone would recognize who was dropping it off.
So part of your job was you went out into the community and you tried to get him a job that anybody else could get, right?
He was unemployable, yes.
And he couldn't get that job, right?
Correct.
So you employed him as a
That's right.
And you never knew him when he worked as a police officer, correct?
No, I did not.
So you can't say anything about what his reputation was or how he performed his job as a police officer.
I
correct?
checked his disciplinary history, but that's about it. I never worked with him. I was never a supervisor of his in the field, no.
And he had numerous complaints filed against him, correct?
None sustained.
Exactly,
Right,
right?
right.
Even the one where we have a civil rights suit?
None
He never
sustained.
gets a sustained finding, right?
Some do.
No, I'm talking about him.
None sustained that I'm aware of, no.
Nothing else, right?
Ms. Wayne, anything else?
Very briefly, you provide or attempt to provide employment for all Chicago police officers who can't find jobs in our mental system. Is that right?
That's correct if they ask. You know, some officers are married to officers, so their insurance coverage is maintained. And one of the family, you know, the husband or the wife winds up in a no-pay status. They're in a different situation. When Jason came to us after a mom and pop store refused to hire him when they promised to hire him because demonstrations about Blue Lives Matter stores or we support the police beef stands were being demonstrated against, they didn't feel that they could take the risk on putting Jason in the store. And that job fell through after our delivery jobs and our unloading dock jobs fell through. So he sat there and quote, said, "I'll scrub toilets."
And you know his financial situation personally because you are friends with the family and your wives are essentially best friends. Isn't that right?
Pretty much.
I have nothing else.
Ms. Gleason? Thank you. Thank you very much. You can step down.
Thank you.
Keith Thompson.
All right, Kelly. What's the conditions on this? Well, then just tell me. It ain't a secret. It's good. Okay, I'll stay.
Watch your step, remain standing, face the clerk.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony about to give truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Have a seat, please. Thank you. Oh my God, I think you heard it quite a bit. Pull your seat up to the microphone. The microphone's live. Speak into the mic, and everybody will be able to hear your testimony, and that would be great. Proceed, Ms. Wen.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, my name is Keith Thompson, Keith Thompson, Thomson.
And how do you know Jason Van Dyke?
Jason Van Dyke is my brother-in-law. Our sisters are married, so he's like a good friend of mine and my brother. So
You said your sisters are, your wives are
our
sisters?
wives, I'm sorry, our wives are married. Yeah, they're sisters.
Okay. And how long have you known Jason?
Over 13 years.
Okay. Can you tell us about your relationship with him?
Yeah. We began as great friends. We have a lot in common. Our wives have the same personalities. We have two girls, both of us. They're the same age. They're also best friends, so that helped us to grow and develop our own relationship as well. We always spend time together whenever we can. We have birthdays, holidays, family events. And then whenever you have time, we would try to get our own time in here as well and sneak away from everybody else.
And what are some things that you and him do when you're alone?
Well, Jason likes to fish, and I like peace, so we'd always go fishing because he would get his way out of it, and so would I. But anything we could just do, mostly talk about our families and our kids because we had so much in common regarding that. So that's what kept us going always and pushing each other back and forth.
And what kind of a father is Jason?
He's a great father. He's a stand-up man. He provides, protects, does whatever he can to make sure that his family is safe. And it's an important priority. He also does the same for me and my family. So it's a great father.
Can you describe Jason as a person, his demeanor, characteristics?
Yeah, I always call
Character.
him the gentle giant. What I've always called him. He's always the one to calm down a situation, or if there's something going on, he's always the one that talks everybody down, brings us back together, and builds us back up. I know those incidents where he was in court and there was an incident going on with his oldest where he had to leave court to take care of her. And he left an account meter, made sure that he left, took care of responsibility, got to his daughter, calmed her down, kept her safe, and then, came back and did what he had to do.
Describe your relationship with his girls.
His girls are like my daughters. I do whatever I have to do for him. He's told me he respects me. He would like me to watch over them, take care of them, and make sure that they're okay. So I treat them like they're my own.
During this time, is that what he referred to when he asked if you would take care of them? Is
Yes,
when
he did.
he's in jail?
Yes, he did.
And is that why you're here today?
Correct.
What have you noticed about Jason since this case has been pending, if anything?
It's been a big change. As far as going out in public and everything that's changed, we don't do that anymore. He stays at home. He worries about his family, his kids, the threats they received, the ways in ridiculed in the media as a monster, a racist cop, a killer. A lot's changed, He tries to make sure that he takes care of what he can, make sure his wife and kids are safe, and just provides.
Do you think he's a racist?
Absolutely not. That'd be the last thought in my mind. He's been portrayed that way, but in the last 13 years that I've known him, there's not a single incident that I can recall where I would have thought that maybe there was a certain way he treated somebody, but everybody was treated the same way. It didn't matter the color of their skin. It didn't matter how they were raised or their financial situation. It's just he demanded respect, and he also gave respect. That's how he was.
Is there anything else you'd like to say, Keith, before Jason's sentenced?
I would ask the court to just consider everything he's already lost and what his family is currently going through and what they will continue to go through. My brother is now a convicted felon, so everything for him and his family will be extremely difficult going forward from here on out. We just ask that if he goes to prison, it's going to be a tragic outcome for his family to try to survive on their own, they will lose everything, you know. So we just ask that at the time, you know, we give him time served and probation so he can be at home with his family where he deserves to be.
Keith, you indicated that Jason is not racist. Are you African American?
I am.
And you've never experienced any kind of racism?
Never.
Over 13 years, you
Over 13 years, multiple incidences, multiple races around us. I've never had that thought that maybe he's a racist. It's never been that thought.
And you don't just call Jason your brother-in-law, do you?
No, he's my brother. I was an only child, and you know, if I had to claim somebody as a brother, I'm supposed to have your brother right there.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions.
No questions.
For scheduling, who else are you going to be testifying?
We have 4 more witnesses.
I start naming them so we can get them.
Okay, Heidi Coffinger.
Watch your step, remain standing as you speak.
Raise your right hand. Solemnly swear or affirm that you will testify the truth.
Yes.
Have a seat, ma'am. The seat's adjustable. Pull the seat up to the mic. Speak into the mic. Everybody will be able to hear your testimony, and that would be greatly appreciated. Proceed, Ms. Nguyen.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Heidi Coffinger,
Could you please spell your name?
Heidikauffunger.
And how do you know Jason Van Dyke?
He's my brother.
Brother?
Yes.
Heidi, what's your occupation?
I work full-time.
Were you and Jason raised together in the same house
That's correct.
by both your parents?
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your relationship with Jason growing up?
We were really close. Jason and I, while we had separate bedrooms, we would run back and forth between our bedrooms. Oftentimes, we would have sleepovers. We really didn't fight at all growing up either. We would either sometimes hang out together or his friends. He had a lot of friends in the neighborhood we would hang out with. In grammar school and high school, we were about 4 years apart. So Jason would drive me to school in the morning, as well as he would drive me to school, to high school. He would pick me up from basketball practice, take me to friends' houses. He was always there whenever I needed anything. And when this happened, everything changed. You know, he's not the same person. But one other thing that I do remember is when we were growing up, there was a little boy down the street by the name of Timmy, and Timmy had Down syndrome. And he really looked up to Jason. He was one of the people that Jason really enjoyed to see, would get a big smile on his face. They hung out together when they were little. They would go swimming together, walk around the neighborhood. And whenever they would, as they became older and they saw each other, they would always talk.
Heidi, when did you learn of Jason's arrest?
I didn't learn about it right away. At the time I was pregnant, and Jason didn't want that to affect my pregnancy. I found out about it in May of 2016 before the video was released. Jason just really wanted to protect myself and my baby at the time.
What kind of a father is Jason?
He's a great father. For me, Jason was a role model when he became a parent. He was just wonderful. He was very calm. When something would happen, say for example, somebody would decide to go digging in a pot and dirt would be all over the floor, he would just take a deep breath and say, hey, how are we going to clean this up? And he would just work at it with his kids. You know, he always handled everything calmly and rationally. and he was a great example for his girls. Family is his number one priority, and it's also his support system, including my family and myself. He always worked 3 jobs so that Tiffany could stay home with the girls, and he would always call every night to say goodnight to his girls and just check in with them, make sure they did their homework. If he was home, he would go through their homework with them. He would take them to dances, took them to father-daughter dances. When his oldest was growing up, he was the one who was the primary caretaker along with working until Tiffany stayed home, and he taught her how to dance. And because he was holding her when they were dancing, she learned how to do a one-arm dance. And that was the dance that she did when Daddy was at work, was the one-arm dance. The other thing about Jason is he's always there for his girls. Whenever they need somebody to talk to, he's always there to give them advice.
Heidi, can you describe Jason's demeanor, characteristics?
Sure. Jason is a rule follower, never got in trouble. He always wore a watch growing up. When our parents would say, be home by this certain time, he was always there. Our dad had an air horn that he would use to call us home. And really, it wasn't needed for Jason because Jason always had the watch on his wrist and he was home on time. That was more for me. Jason was always there on time. Also he was in band. He would follow along. And in marching band, he was always on with the proper foot at the right time, just following along with it like clockwork. He's also a very loving brother, father, son, uncle, and friend.
What have you noticed about Jason since this case has been pending?
He's withdrawn. There's a huge difference in how Jason was since the case has started. He won't go out in public, and if he does, he wears a disguise. His kids are being bullied and threatened. His house has been egged. There have been protests in the beginning in front of his house. People walking with his face on poster boards while the kids are at home with the blinds drawn, so hopefully they don't see any of it. When he comes to court, there are people outside screaming at him that he's a murderer, that they hope he goes to jail. He has to wear a bulletproof vest when he comes here. And the worst of it is really how the kids are being affected and have been affected since he was in jail 3.5 months ago. It's really taking a huge toll on them, as well as Tiffany, financially and emotionally in every way. And once at the Thanksgiving, once he had to come to jail for six days, when he came back home, he went into a deep depression. He didn't come out of his room. The blinds were drawn. And he just stayed in there all the time for quite some time. He didn't talk to anybody. He put on a lot of weight. He grew out his hair. And it just took a lot of time until he started coming out of that shell.
What have you noticed about your parents since this case has been pending?
It's taken a toll on their health. I would say there's more anxiety, a lot greater concern, especially with myself, constantly calling to check in on me because they're worried. They only have one kid they can call to see how they're doing now, and they have to wait until the other one is able to make a phone call to say hello.
What is the family dynamic like since Jason's been charged?
He doesn't always go to he wouldn't always go to family gatherings. He was abandoned, alienated, ostracized by family, friends, co-workers. There was a family wedding, and both Jason and my parents received phone calls that he was sent an invitation by mistake, and he was not supposed to attend because they didn't want the attention taken away from the bride.
How has this case affected his girls? I know you said bullied. Was there anything else specific?
Definitely. The oldest has been ridiculed at school. She's had 16 shots and her last name written on a desk. She's had photos taken of herself and passed around school. She's still continued to have people come up to her and take her photo and run away. They have been threatened at school. Her younger sister has had a threat to shoot her. It just really worry about them being able to grow up without their dad there to continue to rely on them, or for them to rely on him, and for them to be able to survive financially. Everything is done by Tiffany now, and while Jason did a lot before too. They all continue to have a close relationship, but he does need to be back home to help them out with everything. They're thick as thieves.
Is there anything else, Heidi, you'd like to say today before Jason is sentenced?
Yes. Jason will never be a police officer again, or will never be able to carry a gun. He's a convicted felon. His livelihood is gone in the blink of an eye. His reputation, his names, the kid's name, as well as Tiffany's. All of it is ruined. They've suffered financially. It's going to be difficult for Tiffany and the girls to survive. I would just ask the court to consider all he has lost already and what he, Tiffany, and the girls have already gone through. My brother is now a convicted felon. Everything will now be extremely difficult in his life, and his family has to bear the weight of this. If he goes to prison, it will have a tragic outcome for his family. They will lose everything. Please give him probation and time served. For his family who needs him and had no involvement in any of this. Jason knows no arrogance nor impudence. He has a greater care and want to help others.
Thank you, Heidi. I have no more questions.
Thank you, ma'am. You can step down. Who's your next witness?
Owen Van Dyke. Owen Van Dyke.
Let your step remain standing, please, clerk.
Please not swear or affirm that such
Have a seat, sir, and then the seat's adjustable, the microphone's adjustable. Pull your chair up to the mic, speak into the mic, everybody will be able to hear your testimony, and it would be greatly appreciated.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Name is Owen Van Dyke, O-W-E-N, capital V-A-N, space, capital D-Y-K-E. Father of Jason Van Dyke.
Mr. Van Dyke, can you tell the court about your son?
Where should we start? Start with the letter? Or we want to start with something else?
Yes, the letter would be
Excuse me,
good.
come over here for a second then, please. You too, Ms. Wynn.
Thank you. Mr. Van Dyke.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you prepare a letter, a
Yes, I did.
statement that you would like to read to the court?
Sure.
Okay.
Certainly, sir. Go ahead.
I'm just sitting here writing a letter on behalf of my son, Jason. I'd like to start off by saying Jason is not the person that was described by the prosecutors. Jason is tolerant of people's right. Jason was reading beginner books when he entered kindergarten. He also made the honor roll numerous times in grade school, high school, college. Jason also learned to play 2 musical instruments. He was accepted to join the jazz band in grade school, played football in grammar school and high school, worked part-time job, still maintained focus on his studies, also was made Employee of the Month at his part-time job twice. And the second time he made Employee of the Month was after he gave his 2 weeks notice to quit. Jason also paid his way through school while maintaining a full-time job, raising a family. Jason was chosen for the TR unit of the Chicago Police Department, was one of the officers that went to Washington, D.C. to represent Chicago on a security detail of President Obama's second term. A little later, Jason was sent to bomb school in New Mexico. Jason also received numerous credits from the police department. I don't believe he went this far in the police department on luck. One must have the understanding of the values of a good policeman. Jason is also a member of the Knights of Columbus, Archangel Council 12173. As I stand behind my son, as my father stood behind me, as the father stood behind him, as your parents stood behind you. I hope you find some compassion in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Van Dyke. I have nothing.
Was there another letter? Mr. Van Dyke, was there another letter?
Oh, there's probably is here. There's something else here.
I do have.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. All right, yeah. Jason lived in a diverse community until we built our house. Grammar school and high school were also diverse school districts. Jason was a good student. Played 2 instruments, as I said before. Also played jazz band, marching band. Played flag football, fresh soft football. It was also a pleasure to watch him play in the band and sports and see him progress he made, all while keeping his grades up. As a student, he did well, made the honor roll, like I said before, several times, even in college. Jason's hobbies were diverse. Jason finished his degree while raising his family. Both Jason and his wife would tutor their children when they didn't understand the class assignment, help out in school projects. Jason also volunteers at his parish. One would say he is a Catholic and a Catholic in his religion, as he stood along volunteer at his parish. Jason, as you judge, your family stood by you. We believe the Constitution of Illinois and the laws of this country, of this great country, that have stood the test of time, which leads to this question: why wasn't this tried under the guidelines of Graham versus Monroe or Graham versus Ferguson? These decisions were handed down from the U.S. Supreme Court on incidents involving police officers. Instead of trying this case as a civil case, as a criminal case with all theory, and very little hard evidence to prove that this beyond a positive proof that I and my family would like to see this verdict dismissed. As the police superintendent said on television, police officers run towards trouble, not away from trouble. One could go on, but I will close at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Van Dyke. I have nothing else.
Thank you, Mr. Then call your next witness.
Kevin Graham.
Not at all, sure.
Watch your step, remain standing and be first.
Solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Can you have a seat? And then, again, the seat's adjustable, the microphone's live. Pull your seat up to the mic, speak into the mic. That would be greatly appreciated. Proceed, Mr. Herbert.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm good.
Would you please introduce yourself and spell your last name?
My name is Kevin Graham, Graham. I'm a Chicago police officer and president of the Fraternal Order of Police here in Chicago, Lodge 7.
And Mr. Graham, how long have you been the president of FOP?
About a year and a half.
And how long have you been a Chicago police officer?
More than 20 years, about 22. I've been a police officer longer than that.
Did you work in a different department as well?
Yes, I did.
Where did you work prior to joining the Chicago Police Department?
I worked in for the Cook County Forest Preserve Police, and I also was a police officer in Morton Grove and in Hawthorne Woods.
Okay. And you're married and have children, correct?
That is correct.
And Mr. Graham, you have gotten to know Jason Van Dyke, is that correct?
Yes, I have.
And approximately over how many years have you known Jason Van Dyke?
Approximately 3 years.
And during those 3 years, have you been able to determine what type of character Jason Van Dyke has as a person?
I have, and I think I'm a fairly good judge of character after being a police officer for more than 35 years.
And what is your determination as to his character?
He is a quality individual who cares about society, cares about the people that he serves, and the people that he works with.
And Mr. Graham, in your role as a FOP president, have you spoken to other police officers that either worked with Mr. Van Dyke or know Mr. Van Dyke?
Yes, I have.
And have you been able to determine what type of reputation he had with his coworkers?
It's been, I haven't heard one person say a bad word about him. He, as I already stated, he cares about people. He has a good work ethic. He worked at the FOP and could never do enough. He always made sure he was detail-oriented. I've already stated about how well he cares about people. He made sure that people were taken care of, that if there were people that were coming into the building that were handicapped, that we made sure we had ramps for them and that they can get around. And he didn't need to be told that. He knew that on his own because of how he cares about people.
Great. And finally, Mr. Graham, in your role as a police officer, have you talked to other police officers about the effects of the Jason Van Dyke case and what effects it's had on them?
You know, many police officers have come up to me and they've asked me, what are we supposed to do when somebody comes at us with a knife? How are we supposed to defend ourselves? What is now the protocol for this? And I've told them the law has not changed. And we need to make sure that we stay safe as police officers and that we go home to our families.
As a result of talking to these police officers, have you been able to determine whether or not Jason Van Dyke's arrest and conviction and public trial, has that had any deterrent effect on other police officers that you know of?
Oh, I think it has. I think the very fact that they're asking me those questions, they're a little hesitant as to when they go out on the street. They are making sure that they have backup coming, that they are far more careful because they don't want to be sitting in his shoes.
Fair to say that every single Chicago police officer is aware of this case, correct?
Well, that would be a guess, but I feel fairly certain that they are aware. Yes.
Okay. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Could I say one more? You know, I have gotten to know Jason. I also know that he and I both became Knights of Columbus at the same time.
And that's a Catholic.
That's a Catholic organ. I think there it is. That's a Catholic organization. I know that I have seen him at FOP by himself praying. I know that it bothers him that a life was taken. And I also know that if justice is served, he will not get a long sentence. Because you put somebody in prison as something that they are responsible for. And the Chicago Police Department owns a piece of the responsibility that comes along here, and they're not here to take that responsibility, and they're leaving it on him, and that's wrong.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Cullen?
Thank you, Eric. Mr. Graham, you talked about justice being served today, is that correct?
I did.
Now, after this jury rendered its verdict, you called in the press, you called this a sham trial that occurred in this courtroom, is that correct?
No, that's a lie. I did not say that.
Now, you've talked about how this crime has affected members of the Chicago Police Department, is that right?
That is correct.
Now, before the killing of Laquan McDonald, there were problems with trust within the community as it related to the Chicago Police Department, is that correct?
I'd say that's safe to say.
And the Chicago police officer had a difficult job due to the lack of trust from the community. Is that right?
I would say that that is fairly correct.
And when...
Excuse me. Jim, could you fix the feedback on the microphone? All right. Go ahead, Mr. Combs. Sorry for the interruption.
When Jason Van Dyke killed Laquan McDonald, that act significantly further eroded the already fragile trust between the community and the Chicago Police Department. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct.
You would not agree with me that every officer in the Chicago Police Department has suffered because of the acts of the defendant, Jason Van Dyke.
No.
Would
you like me to explain that?
Are their jobs easier or more difficult?
More difficult.
Because Jason Van Dyke killed Laquan McDonald. Is that correct?
No.
Anything else? Nothing else.
Thank you.
Who's your next witness?
Tiffany Van Dyke.
Thank you.
Watch your step and remain standing face first.
Shall we swear or affirm that the testimony about to give you the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Have a seat. If you get to again, like say it 8 times. The seats and microphones live. Pull your seat up to the microphone. Speak into the microphone, and everybody will be able to hear your testimony, and that would be greatly appreciated. See, Ms. West.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I just knocked this off. Jim. Okay. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Tiffany Van Dyke. Tiffany Vandyke.
How do you know Jason?
He is my husband.
How long have you been together?
This March we will have been married for 17 years. We've been together almost 20.
How did you meet?
We both worked at the same location. We were friends at first, fell in love, then came all of the following: marriage, children.
Okay, you have how many kids?
I have 2 children. Kaylee is 17 and my youngest is 12.
And you, Jason, and the girls lived in the city together, city of Chicago?
We did live in the city. We still live in the city.
Do you work?
Yes, I do work. I have always worked. With my husband working, I've also worked in conjunction with him.
You're working full-time now, correct?
I am currently working full-time. In the last few weeks, I have managed to acquire a position in of employment that does offer me benefits for my children, since I no longer have those.
You used to?
I did used to have those, as my husband was a police officer for so many years. That was one of our benefits, was health coverage.
And when did you lose that health coverage?
The day they stripped him from the department, he lost all of his pay. He went into no pay status. When an officer goes into no pay status, they lose all of their health benefits and all of their pay.
Did you go without health insurance?
We did go without insurance. My husband and I both went without insurance for over a year. I did get my children on the All Kids Care program. If my husband and I had anything to do, we needed to make sure we took care of our children. And we knew that if we got sick, we could handle it. And we made sure our children were taken care of.
Can you describe your relationship with Jason?
My husband is my everything. He is my other half. He's my heart. And my husband is a very kind, gentle man. He would give you the shirt off his back. Thank you. He would give you the shirt off his back. He loves with all of his heart. There is no malice in my husband. There's no hatred. There is no racism to my husband. He's a great human being, a great father, and a wonderful husband. He was also a very great, dedicated police officer to the city of Chicago. They have lost a great officer.
Can you tell the court what life has been like for you since the verdict?
My life has been a nightmare. My life has been turned upside down, inside out. My husband is not with me. I cannot sleep without him in my bed beside me. I cannot have my daily activities. I don't have my husband. My children don't have their father. Life it's torture. My heart is broken.
What is your daily life like now?
My daily life, I wake up every morning thanking God I woke up every morning. My first thought is my husband. I think of Jason. It's my first thought. I have to always think of him. And then I get up, I take care of my children like I'm supposed to, like the mother I am. And you go through the day for day. You just think, okay, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to take care of my kids. I'm going to do their activities. I'm going to come home, still take care of my children, hopefully speak to my husband on the phone for one possible 20-minute phone call once a day, and then go to bed without my husband and do it all over again the next day.
Do the kids get to speak to him on the phone?
They do get to speak to him on the phone. They get a 10 to possibly up to 20-minute phone call. It is very expensive.
How much is it?
Every week, I must spend a minimum of $400 to $500 on phone calls for the three of us to speak to him. That is not cheap.
Yeah. What's it been like for your daughters without Jason there?
As you can see, my little one is not in this room. She's too young to be in the room. Both my daughters are very heartbroken. They've had the only person, he was the first person to hold them when they were born. He is their absolute everything. He is their life. And they're torn apart. My children don't sleep. They don't eat. They have nightmares. They don't feel safe in our own home. The place that we have made a castle, that is our sanctuary, is no longer a sanctuary for us. They get bullied in school. They get children who have no idea about life telling them that their father is a murderer. My oldest gets things written on her desk at school saying 16 shots with her last name on it. My oldest also gets her picture taken in school and passed around so people can corner her and beat her. And I cannot protect her in that school system. My children have paid the price. They've lost their father.
Were you considering private school before this happened?
I was. My oldest is a junior in high school. At the time we were looking at high schools, we did want her to go to Catholic high school. She had gone to Catholic grammar school prior and needed her to go to Catholic high school. Unfortunately, our financial situation did not allow for that, and we could not even allow her to test into the Catholic high schools because of the fact that it was just a letdown for her emotionally. She is in a public high school currently, and my daughter actually is extremely smart. She excels very well in the school that she is in because my husband and I have instilled in her and my youngest, your education is important. Your education is the only thing that matters, and continue with your studies.
What has life been like financially?
Life financially, since the entire situation has, since 2014, is tragic. It is not easy by any means. My husband worked 2 to 3 jobs at one time to help support us, so that way I could be the main person to stay at home to take care of our children. I did also work. I had 2 jobs at the same time, one of which I had to stop doing because of threats on my life, threats to my clients, threats to the location that I worked at. And I personally had to stop doing what I loved to do, as it was a personally owned business. And I stopped that for fear of my safety, for fear of the public. And I lost a large amount of income due to that, and only had 1 job at that time. That job was part-time. It did not afford any health coverage. It was minimum wage. It was enough to help pay some things in the home. My husband went into no pay status. We had a hard time trying to make sure ends were meet. We both agreed the only thing that mattered was to keep our home. Our children needed a home. We kept the roof over our children's head. So the number one thing was always to make sure the mortgage was paid. After that, we figured it out. If one week we decided, okay, this is the electric bill, well, maybe we'll pay the electric bill. We lived off of credit cards. Only way to pay for things was to put it on credit. I now solely have to make sure that that is paid. I do not have anything to help my children. I do not have anything to help myself. I do not have anything to help my husband. I live day for day, dollar for dollar, just like everybody else. I fight for everything I have. Everything I can give to my children, I fight for.
Are the girls involved in sports or dance?
They were involved in sports. They were also involved in dance class. Both my children, since they were very little, at a very young age, danced. My oldest was in competitive dance. She loved it. It was her heart and soul. It's her stress reliever. It's something she loves to do. And when you find something you love to do, we encouraged it. We pushed her. We made sure that she did something that she loved to do. Fortunately, that comes with a gigantic price tag. And my daughter no longer dances. She does not do what she loves to do. She tried out for the dance team at her local high school. They didn't accept her. You can give any reason in the world as to why, say she's not good enough. That's not the reason. The reason is the name that is attached to her. The last name Van Dyke is not a name that goes well within the city of Chicago.
Have you personally experienced any kind of
I have personally experienced it. I lost a position that I was hired to do, that I worked hard, trained hard, and received qualifications to do. That was a Cook County correctional officer. I passed every exam, I passed every test, every physical thing you could throw at me. I passed with flying colors. My first day on the academy, they pulled me. They kicked me out of the academy, did not allow me to have a job where I would be able to support my family, have health coverage for my children and my husband, and did not afford me that opportunity because my last name is Van Dyke.
Is that what they told you?
Yes. They did not come out and blatantly say it. I have come to find out that that was the reason. Because of who my husband is, I was not afforded the opportunity to have a good paying job to support my family.
Did you spend money on uniforms?
I had to personally take out a loan in order to buy uniforms for the position. I still have those uniforms that I am not allowed to wear because of the fact that I was pulled from that position. That came with a heavy price tag as well, which is something that they do not pay for. They did not pay for. I am still paying for. And they sit in a suitcase and I can't use them.
Can you describe what it's been like coming into this courthouse for Jason's trial?
To come into this courtroom for Jason's trial was one that my husband prepared me for. He told me, this is how things are going to go. It's going to be scary. People are going to be screaming at you, screaming at me. They're going to be saying very foul, inhumane things, calling my husband a murderer. My husband is not a murderer. Calling him all these vile things over and over again, repetitively. Threats to his life. A sniper threatening to take my husband out. Him having to make sure that myself, my father-in-law, and him have to wear bulletproof vests to come and go from a public courthouse so that way we are safe was very shocking to me. It broke my heart. My husband was more afraid of my life and my father-in-law's life than his life. I was afraid every day coming in and out of this courthouse that somebody was going to shoot and kill my husband.
And that was because of threats?
That was because of threats.
Everybody knows that your kids didn't attend the trial, but they're here today.
My kids did not attend the trial because my husband and I were still protecting them. We were still keeping them private. They are still children. They go to school every day. We needed to make sure that they were taken care of and not in the limelight. Media is not a good thing. The media is harsh. The media is mean. The media is manipulative. And my children don't need to be exposed to that. Today, they are here because this will be the last time that they see their father before he goes to prison. They need to be able to see him physically and smile at him, show them that they love him, show them that they care for him, and that they still support him 150%.
What were some of Jason's proudest moments in his personal life?
In his personal life, if I think I could speak for my husband and myself, our proudest moments, one of which is our wedding day. The next two would be the birth of our children. He was the first to hold them after they were born. They are his life. They are his everything besides me. His family means everything to him. The other proudest moments, I would say, I know for myself, and I could possibly say for Jason, is the day he became a police officer. The day I watched him walk across that stage and get his star and go on to the job as a Chicago police officer was a very proud moment for both of us. He knew his calling. He knew he wanted to serve and protect. And that's what he did for a very long time. And that's what I still wish he would be able to do. Unfortunately, that will not happen ever again. He did have many opportunities. He did come up in the ranks in the police department. He was offered to be in specialized units that he was very proud of. He loved being in these special units and working with his fellow officers. He was also awarded the opportunity very select few Chicago officers were given the opportunity to go and be private security for Barack Obama's second inaugural parade for his security detail. My husband was selected for that. He went to Washington, D.C., and he held the line for President Barack Obama.
Was he on the sergeant's list?
Yes, he was. He took the sergeant's exam. He always wanted to excel. He always wanted to grow within the ranks. He knew what he wanted to do, and that was to make sure that he could serve and protect. And he loved his job. He loved his career, and he took every opportunity he could to advance.
Tiffany, what concerns you about the possibility of Jason going to prison today?
My biggest fear is that somebody will kill my husband for something he did as a police officer, something he was trained to do. There was no malice, no hatred on that night. It was simply a man doing his job. My other fear is that I'll never see him again. My children will never see him again. He won't see graduations, proms, weddings, grandkids. My youngest doesn't even have her driver's license. He teaches them those things. He won't have the opportunity to teach them. He won't have the opportunity to still shape their lives. I'm afraid every day, every single day, I go to bed praying that he is safe and praying that he will come home.
Anything else?
What do you have to say to the McDonald family?
I do have to say, we do pray every single day for your family. It was a tragedy. This was not something that was hateful. This was not something other than my husband doing his job, what he was trained to do. We pray every single day for this family, for my family, for your family, for everybody, for the entire city of Chicago to have peace. That's all we want. We want both sides to have peace.
And Tiffany, finally, do you have anything else you'd like to say to the court before your husband is sentenced?
I do. I would like to ask the court to please take into consideration that my husband is a man. He's a human being. He was a very good, dedicated officer. He's a very good, loving husband, a very good, loving father. He has paid the price. He has paid the ultimate price. He will no longer be a police officer. He will no longer be able to gain any form of employment that will be able to help support my family. His life is over. Please, please. He has paid the price already. My heart and soul are broken. They will not be mended until he comes home. My children will not rest and not be safe until he comes home. He has paid the ultimate price. I love my husband very much. That will never change. I just beg for the least amount of time, if not probation, for my husband. My husband does not deserve a lengthy time frame for doing his job as a police officer.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
I don't have any more questions.
Thank you. All right, who's your next witness?
We don't have any more witnesses. So.
All right.
At this point, defendant, like to address.
Yeah, that'll be after the closing argument. All right, there'll be short recess at this time.
Read all the letters. Yeah.
every single family. It has a real impact financially, it has a real impact emotionally, and it has a real impact on the relationship between those family members. But Mr. Van Dyke and his family is not unique in that situation. He should be, like this jury treated him when they evaluated the evidence, he should be and must be held to the same standard and face the same consequences for his horrific, devastating conduct. There is, as you know, Judge, a presumption in favor of probation under the statute, under the law. That does not mean that you must give probation. And in this case, probation is absolutely not appropriate. Probation, given the facts of this case, given the role of the defendant, given the crimes which he has been convicted of, would clearly deprecate the seriousness of his conduct and send the wrong message to this community. It's the defendant's actions that have eroded the public confidence. He has betrayed the public trust that we as a community give to law enforcement. So many of the letters that have been submitted to you in the defense mitigation pact, I know you've had those, I think, for the better part of a week, and you've gone through those. But so many of those letters from current and former police officers and people who swear their life to make us safe talk about the difficulty that they have in performing their job. Their job is difficult because of the actions of Jason Van Dyke. We heard one of the defense witnesses testify this afternoon that the Chicago Police Department bears some of the responsibility. I'm not asking you, we are not asking you to punish Jason Van Dyke for the failures of the Chicago Police Department. The facts that were introduced in this case were narrow. They dealt specifically with the issues of Jason Van Dyke shooting Laquan McDonald 16 times. That's what the jury found him guilty of. That's what we're asking you to sentence him on. A sentence of prison is always difficult. It will be difficult on this defendant, like it is on every other defendant who appears before you. It will be difficult on the Van Dyke family. It will be difficult on the family of law enforcement, not just in this city, but across this country. But a prison sentence is what is appropriate for this defendant, given his conduct, given what he has been convicted of in this case. A significant prison sentence, Judge. When you look at his conduct, shooting Laquan McDonald 16 times, a prison sentence of between 18 and 20 years is an appropriate sentence. We're asking you to sentence him for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McMahon. Mr. O'Brien.
Judge, Mr. Van Dyke must be sentenced on the second-degree murder only. And inasmuch as we stated the obvious, every second-degree murder, someone has been killed. Everyone. The legislature, however, recognized the fact that there are all different kinds of second-degree murders. And when they classified second-degree murder as a Class 1 offense, they took special care to, number one, extend the normal 4 to 15 range to 4 to 20 for those individuals that were more deserving of a greater jail period than other second-degree murder offenders. But one thing they also did is they allowed that Class 1 felony to remain probationable. Not a lot of Class 1 felonies are probationable. This one is. And the legislature left it probationable because they recognized that in some cases, a second-degree murderer might be deserving of probation and no more jail time. The legislature also established factors to assist the court in fashioning the correct sentence. Factors in mitigation, factors in aggravation. And the factors in mitigation that are presented in the statute and that I will talk about briefly here are to determine whether or not this court should withhold a penitentiary sentence completely or minimize a penitentiary sentence. You will see that of the 18 or 20 mitigating factors, some don't apply to Jason Dyke's circumstances, but of those that could apply to the incident, almost all of them apply to Jason Van Dyke. In support of our request that you sentence Mr. Van Dyke to probation, I want to cover some of those mitigating factors. The first one, defendant acted under a strong provocation. That happened here. Mr. Van Dyke was not the aggressor. He didn't start the confrontation. He reacted to what Mr. McDonald did. There were substantial grounds tending to excuse or justify defendant's conduct, though failing to establish a defense, and the defendant's criminal conduct was induced or facilitated by someone other than the defendant. Mr. Van Dyke did not start this. In fact, the motive for this crime is established by the jury's verdict. What do I mean by that? By virtue of the fact that they found him guilty of second degree, they believe that his motive here was that he thought he was acting in self-defense, even though it was unreasonable. But he thought that. There's no other motive to be discussed in this case. He thought he was acting in self-defense, even though it was unreasonable. The jury said that by virtue of their verdict. There are some things that the evidence in this case support as undisputed facts, things that both sides would disagree and everybody who watched the trial would not dispute. Mr. Van Dyke was working as a police officer, a thankless job, at the time this incident occurred. He was found not guilty of official misconduct, so the jury, at least under those circumstances, felt that he did not commit official misconduct. Additionally, Mr. Van Dyke was responding to a call for help. I think one of the witnesses in mitigation testified that the police run towards danger and not away from it. That's what Mr. Van Dyke was doing. A citizen complained about some very violent things that had happened to him. It's undisputed that Mr. McDonald committed many serious offenses prior to his encounter with Jason Van Dyke, from forcible felony burglary to attacking Mr. Barillas with a knife, to criminal damage to state-supported property, to attempting to stab at the vehicle that Officer Gaffney was in. It's undisputed that when Mr. Van Dyke and Mr. McDonald encountered one another, Mr. McDonald was told to drop the knife over and over. He didn't. Mr. McDonald was told to stop. He didn't. Everything that happened was set in motion by Mr. McDonald. And as we sit here today, Mr. Van Dyke has been found guilty of second-degree murder. But those particular factors in mitigation scream out for a sentence of probation in this case. Additionally, the defendant has no history of criminal activity and has led a law-abiding life. Jason Van Dyke. The defendant's offense was the result of circumstances unlikely to recur. The defendant will no longer be a police officer. They'll never occur again. The character and attitude of the defendant indicate he is unlikely to commit another crime. Never committed one before. The defendant is particularly likely to comply with terms of the period of probation. You heard his wife say, Jason's wife say, he's a rule follower. The imprisonment of the defendant would entail excessive hardship on his dependents. And you heard testimony from several sources in mitigation, but in particular from Tiffany Van Dyke, that it would and is currently a hardship on the family trying to make ends meet without Jason's income and without Jason being there for the girls and without Jason being there, period. You heard a lot of testimony from mitigation witnesses about what a great husband Jason Van Dyke is, what a great father he is, from his fellow workers about what a great police officer he was. You have before you evidence of that. Almost 50 honorable mentions generated and given to Jason Van Dyke for job well done. From gun cases to murders to burglaries to robberies to every type of felony that you can imagine. A commendation for his work in narcotics. And before you, you have almost 200 letters from citizens who all ask you for leniency and compliment Jason Van Dyke in one way or another. I know this court is aware that the Constitution of Illinois requires any sentence to have the objective of restoring the offender to useful citizenship. And I know that the court will take that into consideration.
Article 1, Section 11. Thank you.
That's right. One thing I want to ask the court to do, however, prison is a terrible place for anybody to go, and a dangerous place for anybody to go. Goes without saying. But it's doubly or triply or quadruply dangerous for an ex-police officer to go to prison. The likelihood of his being rehabilitated is less if he doesn't survive that prison sentence. This whole case has been, as Mr. McMahon said, devastating. It's a tragedy for all. You don't need me to tell you that. But one fact I ask you to consider in thinking about what was going on that night, what was Jason Van Dyke thinking? This was the only time he ever fired his weapon in the line of duty. The only time. What does that mean? That's huge. It means that whatever was going on that street that he saw scared him more than anything that has ever scared him on that job. And he reacted the way he thought he should. In conclusion, Judge, I think the law, the evidence, and the Constitution and rehabilitative potential of Mr. Van Dyke suggest that Mr. Van Dyke is a candidate for probation or a minimum sentence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Van Dyke, at this time you have a right, what we call elocution, prior to being sentenced, and that's a right to make a statement. Do you want to make a statement?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. If you feel comfortable sitting down, you can do that. If you want to stand up, you can do it.
Jason.
Please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. October 20th, 2014 will always be the worst day of my life. Not because of my actions that day have led to my incarceration, but because I was in fear of my life, fired my weapon, and took a life. To quote an author whose name I can't remember, all life is meaning under all conditions. This has not been lost on me as I think about this daily. This was the first time I had to fire my weapon on duty, and I am proud of that fact. I have prayed daily for the soul of Laquan McDonald, and it was due to my actions that the McDonald family has suffered and felt pain due to the loss of a family member. The taking of a human life is not to be taken lightly. As a God-fearing man and father, I will have to live with this the rest of my life, taking this to my grave. The last thing I ever wanted to do, especially October 20, 2014, was to shoot Laquan McDonald. Much has been made of the video, and people have the right to judge my actions. However, no one knows what I was thinking in that critical moment. I'm scared to death for myself, my fellow officers, and the public. My actions were that of a police officer that tried to make the right decisions in a rapidly escalating dangerous situation. No one wants to take someone's life, even in defense of their own. It is a choice to live with forever.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take about a 5-minute break. It will be brief. Mr. Van Dyke, do you want to stay out here or you want to go in the lockup? Certainly, you'll stay out here then. All right. There'll be a short recess and I will be back to render my decisions.
How do you like that chair? Kelly,
All right, so your images are going to be captured on this TV camera, all right? Again, you have been wonderful. There have been some exceptions throughout the several years that this case has been on my call, and the exception proves the rule. Everybody here has been outstanding. There's a lot of emotion involved, and I understand that. I'm both the Laquan McDonald's family and his loved ones, and Jason Van Dyke and his family and his supporters, and the independent people out there. Some call themselves demonstrators, some call themselves protesters, but these are concerned citizens and they have a constitutional right to be here, all right? But there is no constitutional right to disrupt the court and affect the administration of justice. So let me tell you exactly how I feel. I feel so proud of you. You've been the example for not only for our city and our county and our state, but this is going national on TV. So we will let them see how outstanding individual citizens of this state, of this county, and of this city are, that no matter what the verdict is, and I assume that 100% of everybody's going to be disappointed. So, and that's my job, and I accept it willingly. So thank you. All right. Done. To begin, first of all, we're going to have to go back to when the jury was instructed to get a little insight into this process and into the reasoning for my rulings. Starting off first, the jury was instructed on first-degree murder. And the beginning of the instruction was to sustain either the charge of first-degree murder or the charge of second-degree murder, the state must prove the following propositions. First proposition, that the defendant performed acts which caused the death of Laquan McDonald, and that when the defendant did so, he intended to kill or do great bodily harm to Laquan McDonald, or he knew that such acts would cause death to Laquan McDonald, or he knew that such acts created a strong probability of death or great bodily harm to Laquan McDonald. And third proposition, that the defendant was not justified in using the force. Then the next operative paragraph is, you may not consider whether the defendant is guilty of the lesser offense of second-degree murder until and unless you have first determined that the state has proved the above propositions beyond a reasonable doubt. What that means is, first of all, there has to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that first-degree murder was committed. That is the foundation that second-degree murder consideration has to be laid on. We're not moving any place until the jury came back with the decision that each and every element of first-degree murder has been proven. Then, according to Professor Richard Kling, instead of the common definition of a lesser offense, second-degree murder is first-degree murder, which is the superior charge, plus mitigating factors. So common definition of a lesser offense is that it requires less proof. In this case, and the Supreme Court and the state legislature has the right to use what nomenclature they want. They consider second-degree murder a lesser offense. So this is where we have to get before we start analyzing the different propositions. But again, you have to understand that to get to second-degree murder consideration, which the jury did and came back with a verdict of second-degree murder, the condition preceding to even consider the issues are that there has been a finding of first-degree murder, and each and every element of that finding has to be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, moving on. People versus Lee, which is the Illinois Supreme Court, has been quoted quite a bit. And it is a very instructive case concerning second-degree murder and also aggravated battery charged with a firearm. Justice Thomas, in that case of the Supreme Court, framed the issue, which I think is important here, and that are all aggravated battery with a firearm cases or crimes more serious than the offense of all second-degree murder cases as a matter of law. He analyzed the different elements of aggravated battery with a firearm and also the elements of second-degree murder concerning penalties. And if you look, we use a common nomenclature that second-degree murder is a class 1 felony. Actually, it is a super class 1 felony. The state legislature decided to increase the penalty on second-degree murder by 33%. Instead of 4 years to 15 years in the state penitentiary with 2 years mandatory supervisory release, they increased it to 4 to 20 years in the state penitentiary, along with the other provisions of probation, etc. But looking at that, and then Justice Thomas's analysis of the penalties, his findings were that they overlap because you have the 4 to 20 and you have the 6 to 30. So that would lead to the conclusion, or to support the conclusion, that you have to analyze these cases on a particular case-by-case basis. And the facts in each individual state case controls. And to analyze those facts and to compare which is the more serious offense, and these are case-specific decisions, no general proposition is being issued from this court. This only applies to the case of the murder of Laquan McDonald. So you have to look at the sentences, and once there is this overlapping, we don't have a computer to do that. We have to have a trial judge to look at that to determine which would be the more appropriate sentence for aggravated battery with a firearm or second-degree murder. Back in 1987, our state legislature enacted the crime of second-degree murder. 2 years later, well, it was July, but a little bit more than 2 years later, they enacted the crime of aggravated battery with a firearm. At that time, we have to presume, and certainly our state legislature knew the difference between these two crimes, and certainly the aggravated battery with a firearm came in 1989. If they wanted to eliminate, and they certainly had the power to, they could say in cases of where there's a finding of both second-degree murder and aggravated battery with a firearm, there is no second-degree murder, and the accused or convicted must be sentenced on the aggravated battery with a firearm. Just to take a couple examples, if someone was shot in the baby finger by a firearm unjustly, and all the elements of aggravated battery with a firearm were there, that would be the crime of aggravated battery with a firearm. Again, if someone was shot in the baby toe by a firearm unjustly, and all the elements of aggravated battery with a firearm have been proven, those are aggravated battery with a firearm cases. The thing to evaluate, especially case specific, is here. Is it more serious for Laquan McDonald to be shot by a firearm, or is it more serious for Laquan McDonald to be murdered by a firearm? Common sense comes to an easy answer on that in this specific case. Therefore, my findings are that I will sentence Mr. Van Dyke on the second-degree murder count. Again, applying Justice Thomas's reasoning, I find that the lesser offense in this particular case and set of facts is the aggravated battery with the firearm. Just as an aside, all those shots were done within a range of any place from 14 to so many seconds, but less than 30 seconds at the most. So I consider that one act. So they would all merge, but I'm not going to enter judgment on that, as Illinois requires that with one act, one sentence, one crime. So therefore, there'll be no judgment entered in on the aggravated battery with the firearm counts, and they will merge. I'll enter judgment on the second-degree murder count. Now, again, anytime it gets easy for a human being to sentence another human being, that human being, whether it's a judge or if it's determined in a death penalty case, the jury, they should get out of the business. All right. So this is not pleasant and this is not easy, but this is some kind of a profession that I chose, and I'm not complaining about it. But I certainly have to take in consideration all the feelings that are involved here today and throughout the whole trial. And I want to compliment the lawyers here. I don't have the exact figures, but initially the amount of information that they had was 500,000 emails, maybe more than 100,000 pages of discovery. Laquan's DCF files were in the neighborhood of about 8,700. You people that have been here, you wonderful people during the trial, know the expert witnesses, the reports that have been filed, the motions that have been filed. So both sides have done such a tremendous amount of work, and they're very professional. I want to compliment them. Now, moving on, you've been here today and you've seen the impact that this sentence, this crime has had on Laquan McDonald and his family. You've seen the impact on the Van Dykes and their family, the children. That's the shame. The family are suffering a tremendous amount of pain during this, along with Laquan McDonald's family and loved ones. And I've sat here time and time again, and along with my brother judges that are here in this courtroom, and it's just so senseless that these acts occur, because you can see the pain on both sides of the family. And I think Mr. McMahon said it in closing arguments in the case in chief. This is a tragedy for both sides. So this is not easy, and I don't expect it to be easy. My findings are an appropriate sentence would be 81 months in the Illinois Department of Corrections, 2 years mandatory supervisory release. Mr. Van Dyke, you have two rights I have to inform you of. One, the first right is you have a right to have me reconsider your sentence. That means within 30 days, you'd have to file a written document called a motion to reconsider. In that written document, it must contain all the reasons why you want me to reconsider your sentence. If you could not afford an attorney for that motion and you wanted to have one in preparation of it, the state would pay for that attorney. Do you understand that right? You have to answer yes or no, or you don't know. Okay. The next right is you have the right to appeal both the trial and the sentencing. Again, within 30 days, you'd have to file a different written document, and that document is called a notice of appeal. If you could not afford the appeal, the state would pay for your lawyer, would pay for your transcripts and all filing fees if you couldn't afford your appeal. Do you understand that right also?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, there'll be a short recess. Well, that's the end of the court's of recess. Not yet.
Recess. Cut. It's in recess.
Oh.